Scott Ritter is a former arms inspector. We had him on RBN. I love Scott Ritter's energy, like especially as he's been covering the Israel-Palestine issue. And I don't think it's a coincidence that he's been speaking out about Ukraine since the start, like 2 years, 2.5 years, ever since the start of this conflict. Scott Ritter has been talking about this, and then Scott Ritter becomes based as hell on Israel-Palestine. Like, he's playing on RBN. He literally went to some Palestine event and he apologized. He's playing this on his latest appearance on RBN. He apologized to a group of Palestinians for not being on Israel's ass enough, for buying into that. Like, Scott is going so hard against these motherfuckers, and this is a side point. I don't think it's a coincidence that now they start fucking with them like this. Like, now they're going to have to design this entity as well. This is just an excuse, and it's going to get much worse for our friend Scott, unfortunately, because you can fuck around criticizing other wars if you want. But the second you start going after Israel, bro, it's over. So I want to get your thoughts on this in general, because you had Scott Ritter, who was doing an economic forum in St. Petersburg and was stopped. His passport was seized, and when he was asked what was going on, he was told it was orders by the State Department. So, Dave, what's your general reaction to this before we move on?
Yeah, so that's interesting what you said. I didn't think of that, like, because I know he went to Russia. He was there pretty recently, like a few months ago. And then maybe it was before October 7th. I'm not sure. But I wonder if that's related, like how he's been speaking out against Israel. Because, you go on YouTube, Scott Ritter, if he's on a show or his show, he's getting hundreds of thousands of views. Like, people really like Scott Ritter. They really like to hear what he has to say. And he has been like an unrelenting critic of the proxy war in Ukraine. So, I mean, that's clearly why he's being targeted here, I would say. And this was something I've thought about. I mean, kind of expected almost to see things like this happen when you have people, I've seen a few people go over to Russia, and I have wondered if this was like something that they would do to try to prevent these trips, because with all the sanctions on Russia, they don't want Americans, talking to Russians and spreading the idea of that the U.S. and Russia could get along. No, Russia's, the new big bad enemy now, and they want kind of a new Iron Curtain. So I think it's what's that?
Look at this headline. Like, I just saw this. Like, what?
Oh, why yeah. I mean,
Americans like Scott Ritter spout pro-Putin propaganda. And guys, he doesn't I wouldn't even classify him as doing this. He want peace. But sorry, Dave. I was reacting viscerally to this headline. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dave. I want you.
Well, you see headlines like that, and that reminds me of when Gonzalo Lira died.
Yeah.
The headlines from like the Daily Beast about him were just like completely disparaging his character. I think that was when he was first arrested in Ukraine. I mean, just really disgusting stuff. And that was an American in Ukraine who was jailed and then died in jail for his political thoughts, for his political speech. So here we have something similar. Scott Ritter, someone who is, again, like a relenting critic of the proxy war in Ukraine, and now the situation in Gaza and all of that, and gets his passport seized. And so I saw the initial article about this from RT. That's what we put up on antiwar.com. Has there been any more? Like, has he gotten any more information, or is it still just kind of vague as far as you know?
What I learned, I have a hotspot video come out on this, is that Scott Ritter apparently wasn't the only one.
Mm-hmm.
There's like this Fox News judge guy, I don't know his name, Judge Napiano, something like that. I don't fucking know. He was also stopped too.
So I actually saw that they said that initially Sputnik, but then they issued a correction that said he wasn't.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that. I didn't see the correction, so thank you for that.
But they so it's interesting about Scott. Judge Napolitano is actually a really interesting guy. So he was a Fox News contributor for decades. Judging Freedom is his show, and we run columns from him at antiwar.com. He's like a really good on civil liberties and everything. He's another one. He was very against the Ukraine proxy war. I wondered how he would be on Gaza. Again, Fox News guy, and he has been so good, and he gets tons of views too.
I don't know much about him. That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, look at his guests. Just go on his YouTube page. You'll see all the, he has all the gray zone guys. He has a few of our guys from antiwar.com all the time. He has Scott. He has, and he does like 3 interviews a day. He does a lot of content. So that's another one. I'm sure, I wouldn't be surprised if I'm sure that they're looking at him, you know, if he gets targeted in some way like this. But as
Yeah.
far as I know, there was like a miscommunication there that Sputnik said he got his visa confiscated, but that didn't happen apparently. So, but yeah, I think that's what this is about.
Yeah, what this is so ridiculous because I'm literally looking at these headlines now, bro. The if you interested, bro, Google Scott Ritter and look at the headlines these motherfuckers write about him, bro. The establishment hates this man's guts, bro. That's how you know he's doing good work. Like we have a great time talking to this guy on RBN. He doesn't do this bullshit where he condemn Hamas and all this. He doesn't condemn resistance. The fact he roots for them. And now look at what he says. They say here another headline calling him a propagandist, brain of the Russian propaganda. You have these people smearing Scott Ritter as like a Putin propagandist, but like I said earlier, he's calling for peace. Like he's not. I seen his comment. He's not like pro Russia. And how can you say he's pro Russia because he called for peace and peace in Ukraine? Is he pro Hamas because he wants Israel to end the genocide? Is he pro Xi Jinping because I saw him speak out against U.S. putting forward with China? You guys see how this neocon strategy is ridiculous? Why do they put Russia out? If based on that logic, pro China, pro Palestine. You guys see how they focus on the Russia part of it? Anyway, it's extremely shady. The thing is, this is why it's such a big deal, because there's no travel ban from the United States to Russia, guys. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, why? It's not even about Scott Ritter, guys. There's no travel ban from the United States to Russia. There's no arrest warrant that was put on Scott Ritter. What law did the Biden administration and the State Department use to prevent him from joining a flight? There's no law on the book on this. This is a direct violation of the First Amendment, as far as I know. And you have Russia's media, bro, having a field day with this. You know how they don't show this stuff on mainstream media. I was digging to see what RT field day with this. I saw Fiorella's great report on this. Russian media field day on it. China media field day with this. Here's the Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova. She called on the United States authorities to answer exactly what constitutional amendment they was guided by, for example, for not allowing Scott Ritter out of the country. And I'm asking you guys, what law on the book for that? How did they accomplish this? The overall message I'm sending is that we are governed by lawless beasts who do whatever they want. But the Biden administration is directly violating the rights of Americans casually. Any last response? And I'm gonna ask you, because one of the reasons why they're doing this because Scott Ritter been calling out the United States unhinged policy on Ukraine. And isn't it weird that they don't want people to hear the Russian perspective? Right? You have Biden that gave okay. I'll pass it to you. I do want to wrap up soon. I'm going a little bit longer than I planned, but so I'll pass. I'm gonna combine the questions here because Russia warns U.S. of fatal consequences over miscalculations in Russia, and they also have another headline. I'm trying to make this pretty quick. Let me see if I can find it. Where, this is from your site. So I'll pass you from here. The Kremlin, Western troops in Ukraine have no immunity from Russian strikes. So, and I covered this a few days ago where General Stoltenberg, some person from the fucking
NATO,
I'm blanking on his name for some reason. But he was saying, he said something like, I'm not worried about Russia escalation. We're not worried about that. As Russia is literally screaming from the hilltops. So I shut up. I'll pass to you, Dave, for your general reaction over the Western policies in Ukraine, allowing Ukraine to use United States weapons to strike into Russia, and the insane escalation that's going on right now. I'll pass to you very broadly to take that on, Dave.
Yeah, so these stories like this one that I wrote today, this warning from the Kremlin saying that Western troops, if they are sent to Ukraine, they're going to be targeted by Russian strikes. We have seen Russia, I read the Russian media and they're constantly warning the West, the U.S., NATO against letting Ukraine strike Russian territory with, Western missiles. They're constantly warning against deploying troops. And it does seem like, we don't see it much in our media. And then you see people like Stoltenberg, the head of NATO, saying, we don't have to worry about that. Throughout this whole war, they're always threatening things, warning us not to do certain things. And you see think tankers, people that work at think tanks in the U.S. say similar things that, there's been no escalations. But if you live in Ukraine, you know that there have been escalations. Russia has significantly escalated its war in response. Specifically, one thing that always tends to do it is when Ukraine launches attacks inside Russia. In October 2022, when Ukraine first bombed the Kerch Bridge that connects Crimea to the Russian mainland, that's when Russia started doing the large-scale, missile strikes on Ukrainian energy infrastructure. They didn't do that before then. And that's something when the U.S. invades a country, that's the first thing that they do is destroy the civilian infrastructure. That's what they did in Iraq. And then recently, Russia just launched this offensive in Kharkiv in the northeast in Ukraine from Belgorod, the Russian oblast that borders the region. Putin said that they did that because Ukraine's been attacking Belgorod for the past year. There's been a lot over 100 civilians have been killed. A neo-Nazi militia that's led by like a known neo-Nazi guy called the Russian Volunteer Corps. There's supposedly Russian-born people fighting for Ukraine. They've launched ground raids into Russia, into Belgorod, using American armored vehicles. I mean, so that these are things that people don't realize. Like the escalations have already been crazy, and now the missile strikes. It's Russia has drawn a big red line here again, saying don't do this. And what is their response going to be? Putin has hinted that it could be some sort of strikes on NATO. I would guess, we know that there is a small number of NATO special operations troops in Ukraine. It's been kind of an open secret. This was revealed by the Discord leaks. It said there was 97 NATO special operations soldiers in Ukraine. There's also the mercenaries. So, people question if those are also secretly, like NATO troops or something. But, I wouldn't be surprised if we see, we know specifically that there's British troops in Ukraine helping them fire the Storm Shadow missiles. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Russia hit them or something, because I'm sure that they know where they are. And now you have France talking about kind of doing like a big deployment, they're planning to send like a few hundred troops. I mean, it's completely, and you see this headline here.
Macron lost his mind, man. I was about to ask you about that, about Macron and his actions. You have friends that had a statement that said they're gonna stop following the direction of the United States. They want Europe to become their own Europe, and people was happy about that regarding Gaza. But another context of that statement was regarding Ukraine. Like it wasn't only, it was good regarding Israel, bad regarding Ukraine, because another reason he said it, because he was like, man, I'm tired of these fucking restrictions that the United States is putting on this, which led to Macron. He was being rebuked by a ton of European leaders in Germany and the UK. And he's still like, I don't care. We should start World War III right now by sending French military into Ukraine. So do you have anything else you want to speak on, add to that, Dave, about Macron's posture during this war? Here's the headline: any French military in Ukraine will be a legitimate target for Russian forces, Lavrov says.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, if you look at what's happening in Ukraine now, like it just doesn't make any sense. Like Ukraine has no chance of winning, sending a few hundred troops to train Ukrainians inside Ukraine. I mean, what is that going to do? It just seems like a reason to escalate. Like it seems like just a purposeful attempt to escalate this thing into like a direct war between Russia and NATO, which is just completely crazy. And Macron is kind of strange because in like the first year of this thing, he was one of the few NATO leaders of a NATO country that kept in touch with Putin. He would talk to Putin and he would say things like, oh, eventually we'll need a peace deal. And he even said at one time that they'll need to take into account Russia's security concerns, which got everybody mad at him. And now he's the one, for the past few months, he's been saying, yeah, we should send troops. And actually what he's been talking about, this is a deployment for training that seems like it's going to happen. But what he's been talking about sounded like ground troops to fight Russians. So, he's completely out there. So, and it's like, I can't believe, sometimes I write these stories, I'm like, is this real? Like, are they really going to send these troops to Ukraine just to get killed by Russia, just so they could escalate? Like, it's just, it's really, I know like most people's attention has been on Gaza for good reason, but this is like really getting out of control.
Yeah, and there was even flowing the possibility of a draft. Like many countries in Europe talk because now they full fledged in the rise of the rise of Russia and China, the rise of BRICS, the failure in Ukraine. Because even though I think a lot of it was propaganda, I think maybe there was a lot of arrogance in the neocon establishment that probably believe, oh, we just send weapons to Ukraine. Of course, we're going to defeat Russia. So now that Russia is solidly winning in Ukraine, you're seeing panic. You're seeing the sanctions that the West put on Russia fail. Not only did it fail, the only thing it did would lead to de-dollarization efforts, and now you have more and more countries that are pushing this de-dollarization effort. Now you have Trump. He had a statement that's going to that only going to lead to the escalation of de-dollarization, where he said he's going to go after countries, punish and sanctions countries that go off the dollar, which will only lead to the escalation of that because people are saying that the United States is throwing sanctions around as a weapon. So my absolute last question to you, then we can be in Rabuka. We can go all day. Always great to have you on day. We can always great to get your perspective. But what do you think about the de-dollarization push, which I think a lot of people say this as well, which really started because obviously there was a lot of chatter, but I think actions were taken after Russian sanctions. So what's your thoughts on that? Do you think it's real? Do you think something that Americans should be really concerned about?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely real. I think it's something like, if it continues, it would take a long time before like the US dollar is really in a position that it might lose like its position as the number one reserve currency. But it is something like, when you talk about sanctions and kind of like the hubris of the US empire, before Russia invaded Ukraine, I remember things I was covering for antiwar.com involved like all this concern that Russia and China are growing closer together. And you see that it's like a direct correlation between sanctions on Russia, sanctions on China, US and NATO military buildups in Europe, US military buildups in the Asia Pacific. They're clearly saying to China and Russia, okay, you guys are the enemies. So what is their reaction? Obviously, they're going to work closer together and increase trade. And then that really increased after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and then all the big sanctions on Russia. I mean, their trade has really gone up. And like, again, it's just so obvious. And what is the US doing right now to try to stop it? They're putting more sanctions on Chinese companies. Like, that's just going to make them trade with Russia more. If they're sanctioned by the US, then they're not going to, like, it seems like a flailing empire. And the only person I've seen, like I saw Rand Paul was talking about this. He was kind of grilling Blinken about this. The only one I've seen in Congress say like, what we're doing with China with these sanctions is stupid. Like, you're just sanctioning them thinking that what is it going to do? And if you know anything about China, they're not just going to be like, oh, okay, the U.S. is mad at us for doing this, we're going to stop. If anything, it's going to make them just, do it more. So you wonder, like, I really scratch my head sometimes with these people. Like, are they just that incompetent, or is this part of some kind of plan? I don't know.